Hello, everyone. I want to do a quick video on this third reading from Aristotle's Ethics. If we look at it, it is a discussion of particular moral virtues, where Aristotle gives us a description and assessment of these different virtues. First, liberality, then magnificence, then pride, which is interesting to call that a virtue. For obvious reasons, but and then I think, yeah, pride is the third one. And then what does he talk about? Good temper, I think. No, honor, and then good temper. I want to just give you an example of his discussion of some of the particular moral virtues. We do have this ambiguity in discussing virtue, which was introduced actually in Plato's Meno. Virtue in the singular, which sort of denotes just general excellence or a character trait that you want to have, and then the virtues, the particular virtues, like liberality, like courage, like wisdom, and things like that. So there is this ambiguity in the term itself that you should be familiar with. Generally speaking, the last, speaking of also moral virtues, which had to do with feelings rather than intellectual things. In the last reading, Aristotle characterized moral virtue as a mean. Let's just review kind of what he meant by that. A mean, in this sense, is a kind of balance point. It's borrowed from mathematics, right? It's not mean in the sense of being a mean person. Mean in the sense of being this point in between two extremes. So a mean in this sense, in this metaphorical sense that Aristotle's using it in, is a kind of balance point between two extremes. And the two extremes are vices. That is, they are the opposite of virtue. Let's take the first one he discusses here in the reading is liberality. And liberality has to do with money, has to do with wealth, has to do with the giving and taking of money and how you handle money. And in this sense, the idea is that you want to be known as a liberal person. That is a term of praise, to be liberal. But what does that mean, to be liberal with your money? Does it mean to be free with your money? Does it mean to not care at all about money? Does it mean to give away all of your money? Not at all. No. I mean, being liberal means knowing how to deal properly with money. And what does that mean? Well, generally speaking, if we think about the virtues in this way, right? Virtues of mean, which is not exactly the exact middle or anything, because that, of course, is kind of a metaphor. He's using it metaphorically, not in the strict mathematical sense. Virtue is a mean between two extremes, and those two extremes are characterized as vices, things you want to avoid. But one of the vices on one side is deficiency, having too little, and then on the other side is um, the vice of excess, of having too much. And somewhere in the middle is where you want to be. Basically, all of the moral virtues have to do with feelings and attachments, you might say. And here, your attachment to your possessions, to your money, to your property, to the things that you own. You want to deal with those things properly. To care too much, let's say, about money is to be in the deficiency. That is, that makes you a miser, someone who is mean, someone who is a penny pincher. Um, to have too little, in this case, or to have too much, excuse me, is to be a prodigal. That is, to be somebody who's too loose with money, to somebody who wastes their money. Somebody who's mean is somebody who doesn't tip. Or somebody who is mean is somebody who never gives, who has money, who has a decent amount of money or property and never gives to charity. Or is reluctant to buy somebody a gift, or is reluctant to spend money to even make money. It's just a penny pincher, someone who's too attached to their money. And somebody who's prodigal, as we see in the discussion, is somebody who wastes their substance, as Aristotle says. Somebody who is just way too loose with money, doesn't think about money, doesn't value money at all. And Aristotle sees that as a vice. Now, obviously, if you look back to what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, a certain type of prodigality, where you just don't care about material things at all, it seems to be the ideal. So that's a lesson, right? That Christian ethics and Greek ethics are very different from each other. They're two different ways of looking at life, I would say. So, yeah, I mean, that's more or less why I gave you this, to just give examples of this general thing here, this general idea of virtue as a mean. Well, what does he mean by that? Right? And what does it mean in any particular case to be at the extremes of deficiency, the extremes of prodigality? As Aristotle himself admits, that this doesn't work out perfectly, this scheme of thinking of virtue as a mean and thinking of the vices as extremes and excess and deficiency. You have to sort of adjust it to fit the particular virtues. One of the things we also, and I just want to point out one more thing about this reading, which you can very well read yourself without my guidance, is that when it comes to some virtues, not everybody gets a chance to even get them. If you look at something like magnificence, excuse me, it happens, right? Not everybody gets a chance to exercise the virtue of magnificence, because magnificence has to do with having a lot of money. That is, you can't be magnificent. And magnificence, he's thinking of people who do things that are impressive or great with their money, like building a hospital for people, or building some great monument. Probably in the ancient world, building a temple was considered magnificent. Not everybody gets a chance to do that. In fact, very few people do. So if magnificence counts as a particular virtue, then it's only available to people who have a lot of money. That actually probably goes for a lot of virtues. And that's just the way it is. And in a certain sense, I think it's worth pointing out, because the idea is that you only get to exercise these virtues if you are in a social situation that demands a certain finesse in how you deal with things. So if you're a person of very, very straitened circumstances, you probably don't get a lot of chance to develop the virtues, and that's a big part, I think, of Aristotle's conception of ethics. It's really an ethics for a particular type of person who has a particular status in society, and some of the virtues are available to all of us, perhaps, but a lot of them aren't.